This episode of the Move Mind podcast was brought to you by CBD Mountain, the sport and fitness CBD. Head over to cbdmountain.com for a range of soft gels, skin balms, oils and vapes, and purchase online and have the premium quality CBD delivered directly to your door. cbdmountain.com. Thanks for tuning in to the Move Mind podcast. My guest today is Mr. Garyth Moxey, an Ibogaine provider and entheogenic worker based here in British Columbia. Garyth, thanks for coming on the show.
Hello, mate. You're quite welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm really excited about today's chat. Garyth, if I may, I'd like to start way back in time before the quarantine hit and before this madness came along. Way back maybe toward the good old days.
Right.
I know that you had a bit of experience with the old Peace Convoys and Stonehenge crew back in the UK. I wondered if you could give a little bit of insight on, how you became familiar with the sort of the modern nomadic way of life in buses and festival crews and stuff like that back in the sort of 80s.
Yeah, well, it was quite a phenomena back then. I remember the first time I ever really saw any of that. I was with my dad in a town called Marlborough, which is about 20 miles from Stonehenge. And I think I was about 13 or 14. And there was a lineup of these buses parked on the side of the road. And there was all of these symbols on the side of the buses, like Oms and yin yangs and stuff like that. And I was just so intrigued. There was these people with dreadlocks and stuff. And I was like, who are these people? And my dad was like, oh, pay too much attention to them. They're like hippies on their way to Stonehenge, And I remember I was very intrigued. And then, just a few years later, a couple of years later, I started smoking pot. And then that's when I really kind of connected with that kind of group of people. And I lived in the Southwest around that area, and that was kind of where a lot of the festivals happened. And Stonehenge, I only lived 40 miles from Stonehenge. Wow. And so, it was something that, I later on I'd pass and you'd see that the festival grew and grew. And I think the last year of Stonehenge Festival was in 1984, and there were 30,000 people at that festival.
Wow.
With nobody in charge.
Wow.
Just the people coming together to party on down, and celebrate the summer solstice. So,
so solstice has always been a time of year of prevalence for Stonehenge, right? For the summer solstice and winter solstice as well?
Winter solstice and the equinoxes. So we actually used to go there 4 times a year for the equinox and the solstices. And but after 1984, or was it 1984 was the last year the festival happened. And then after that, there was no summer festival at Stonehenge. It had grown too large, and Margaret Thatcher had come into power. So, the right weren't going to let that happen anymore. And I feel it was kind of a political diversion, if you will. Let's have the media focus on, a bunch of people going doing festivals in the summertime, and then that will kind of divert away from other stuff that the government might be doing. So every summer it became this big thing in the newspapers, the hippies and all the propaganda and bullshit that they wrote about people that lived on the road. So.
Yeah, it's a fantastic and sort of amazing time in British history. Do you think that was the birth of the festival culture as we now know it? Was that the early days of before tickets and before fences? And
yes, totally. They were free festivals, and that's how the festivals kind of started. I mean, Glastonbury's been going for a long time, but I was part of the free festival movement, and that's what I used to go to at first, was the free festivals, not really the paying ones. And there was a lot more of them. They were smaller festivals, and they kind of sprung up, and they were pretty much police no-go zones. In Britain, the police don't have guns, and so if ever they were going to take on large groups of people, then they like to outnumber those groups of people by at least 3 to 4 to 1, and to gather that many people. And that's why they had problems with raves and stuff like that. It was very difficult to police, and changed a lot of laws as well, which they had to. And I think as I know the history as it went, I think there was a festival in Windsor, very close almost next to Windsor Castle. And after that, and that was in 1971. And people after that moved on to have another festival somewhere else, and they just kind of moved on with their bands and small trucks and stuff. And then it then kind of morphed into buses and bigger and more of a gypsy tradition and stuff. So people from the festival community just actually became another kind of group of people that were on the road in Britain. And we've always had a history of travelers, different traveler types, tinkers, Romanies. They've had lots of Irish travelers. There's lots of different groups, which are quite distinct, different ethnic groups that travel on the road in Britain. So the Peace Convoy, as it was known really by the press or New Age travelers and stuff like that, was kind of, it grew out of the unemployed culture, because there was a lot of unemployment back then.
Right.
And so, and a lot of despair in the inner cities and a lot of drug use and stuff. And for myself, joining up with the festival community actually got me away from doing bad drugs and that kind of bad drug use into more of just smoking hash and taking psychedelics.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, more of a mobile sanctuary away from the harder drugs.
Yeah, totally. I mean, those harder drugs were always there in the background. I mean, we were kind of anarchist, do what thou wilt, but it certainly wasn't like it was in just ordinary culture where drug use was becoming very, very prevalent. And we got kind of flooded. That was when in the early 80s we had the first wave of heroin come into Britain. That was causing a lot of havoc.
Yeah, a lot of carnage. Yeah. You touched on there the unemployment being a sort of catalyst to.
It was unemployed culture in some respects. Festival culture was unemployed culture.
Yeah, interesting that people had time on their hands to enjoy
themselves.
A bit like now.
Yeah.
Weirdly. So, in your experience, Garyth, what are some of the most common reasons that you think drive people to substance abuse or addiction? I mean, I know there's probably thousands, and it's a very individual case by case basis. But
it is. Yeah.
You mentioned there, like unemployment, perhaps is one. That's a first starting point. What are some of the more common patterns you see, perhaps in your work now, that kind of trigger people to getting into the harder stuff?
Well, the big one really is the adverse childhood experience.
That's a massive one.
And then that can be traced right back to, if you read stuff from like Gabor Mate, that the kind of stressors can be happening before a child's born, while they're being carried in, by the mother. So, I think that's a big one. Childhood sexual trauma. There's all kinds of things. And I think a lot of it starts at a young age, and of course there are a lot of different factors that that contribute to addiction, and economic prospects being one, and also culture. I feel that in Britain, alcohol was a big thing for me, because it's almost part of like a cultural obligation, if you will. So and I kind of rejected that. I kind of rebelled from that in some respects when I started smoking pot, and then you question like what the fuck is normal here? Like everybody gets drunk on the weekends, and like when the pubs kick out at closing time, doesn't matter where you are in the country, it can be a pretty dodgy time, or it used to be like that when I was younger. Do you know what I mean? You could get beaten up for fucking no apparent reason just because you're a strange face in a strange town. You know what I mean, and all across rural Britain. So I had reasons to reject the common culture that I found there, or to seek something else.
Yeah, fascinating. And what do you think?
Kind of what the convoy thing was seeking.
Right. Yeah, seeking an ulterior,
rebelling and seeking.
A different option to what was sort of on offer. Yeah, and still very much today, drinking culture is massive I think in the West, but especially the UK.
Europe, but UK's got a particular.
It's got a particular streak.
Yeah.
A particular binge streak. What do you think it is about booze that offers people respite and kind of escape? What is it about
Well,
alcohol as a
escapism,
drug?
I don't know. It's, you know, I can't do it like other people can. You know, so, and for some people, you know, it's a social lubricant and stuff, and you know, it's, if it's used in you know, smaller doses, I guess it's, you know, it's not such a bad drug. But as drugs go, like if it was to suddenly be discovered tomorrow, like I think people would be like, oh my god, you know, what
Right.
is this stuff? When we think about what it causes, you know, the harm it causes on a society level, and then if we any of us that have, you know, drank quite a bit, or most of us as adults, you know, we cast back into the most fucking stupid things we've ever done. You know, more often there's alcohol involved in the equation. You know,
Absolutely.
so I don't know. It's been around for a really long time, you know, and
Yeah.
human beings, we like to change our consciousness and have floods of dopamine and stuff like that. So you know, it's you know, all substance. I'm not necessarily against substance. You know, it's just when people fall into addiction. It's not, again, it's not really the substance. It's what, you know, what's causing that. You know, what's
Yeah.
behind that. You know.
Yeah. Agreed. And what in your experience is the kind of the differentiation? How would you explain to people that aren't addicted to anything the differentiation between using something recreationally and then
Hmm.
becoming addicted? What's the difference there? Like there's some
Well, you go
change.
kind of like recreational use to dependency to addiction, you know, and I don't know. There's different grades of that, you know.
Right.
As a society, we're addicted to oil, and it's fucking the planet. You know, so
Yeah.
I see society is actually behaving kind of like an out of control alcoholic at the moment, totally
Yeah.
in denial, you know. And this is a bit of a wake up call, you know. Like this is almost like okay, well, this is a bit of a warm up for what might be coming down the line from the climate change, you know. So so addictiveness, you know, and dependency, you know, a lot of people can be dependent on something and totally functional. You know, that life
Yes.
is kind of like to be managed, right? So
Yes.
I could say I'm probably dependent on cannabis. You know, I have attention deficit disorder, and
Okay.
so I help manage the symptoms of that with cannabis. You know,
Yeah.
which would
Interesting.
be better for me than like I can't take um, um, prescribed what's normally prescribed for attention deficit disorder because I was addicted to amphetamines at one time. So I find now that I can't take substance like that in the way that I'm supposed to, the same way I can't drink. You know, it's my brain chemistry changes, and you know, if I was to, with my drinking, you know, I'd have bouts of sobriety where I'd think, oh, maybe I could have a beer now after 6 months, and you know, then I'd be drunk for another 6 months until I sobered up again. You know, so that's, I think, you know, addiction is really defined as to something that you continuously do regardless of the negative consequences.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Okay.
and a lot of people use drugs recreationally, you know, and do it fine. You know, a lot of people can drink recreationally. I can't. You know, you know, with a group of people, I would just be off and running, and some of us are like that. You know, for different reasons. You
Yeah,
know.
like you say, there's a variety of reasons as to why, and then something happens, doesn't it, when there's somebody's getting addicted. There's a chemical component going on there where like you say, your body needs it regardless, even if
Mm-hmm.
you consciously even want it or not. You
Yeah,
need it now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
In your experience, was booze the first sort of phase of addiction that you experienced for yourself? Was that the first thing
Yes.
that you kind of
Oh no, nicotine.
nicotine, right? Arguably one of the strongest drugs on the planet.
Yes, yeah, totally. And I started when I was like 9. You know, when I moved to Britain, and then I just started hanging out with kids behind the bike shed, the wrong kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
We just, well, they were more fun than all the other kids. You know, obviously. So you know, we just get drawn. People like myself get drawn into hanging with the fun crowd. You know, so.
yeah, interesting. Yeah,
Uh,
nicotine reels you in big time.
yeah, nicotine.
Big time.
So you know, and that's very strong drug. You know, so and then, but when I think about, you know, comforting and self-soothing, when I really cast my mind back, you know, it was before nicotine was Honey Crunch cereal and
All right.
apples. You know, I'd eat Honey Crunch cereal so much, like the roof of my mouth would be raw.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And or apples, same thing. Where I'd eat a bag of Macintosh apples. You know, I'd get into them and just eat too many, and just like because they tasted so sweet, I was just and then I'd be like, oh, my stomach would hurt, and that was the beginning of that kind of behavior.
Yeah, fascinating.
Really self-soothing, and then having
Yeah,
to pay for it afterwards.
yeah,
You know, and that's the beginning of that kind of thing. You know,
yeah. And then it went from
compulsive
booze.
self-soothing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Booze, and then
yeah.
what did you transition to out of booze when booze wasn't serving you anymore?
Booze, cannabis. You know, into cannabis then, and which I latched onto because cannabis. You know, it was self-medicating. As soon as I, you know, found cannabis, I was like, oh, and suddenly I had a lot, because of attention deficit disorder, I had a lot more interest in things. I think that, you know, I was lacking in dopamine, and so, and you know, I was trying to find that extra dopamine with alcohol before that, but it has negative stuff that happens with it. So as an alternative, then it was like alcohol or cannabis. So I found smoking cannabis was better, and I really didn't drink very much, and but then I got into stimulants, and once I found stimulants with the attention deficit disorder, it was like, oh, you know, now I can totally focus. I know what it's like to focus and concentrate
Right. Okay.
stuff in a certain way. So I, you know, I got pulled into the amphetamines pretty quickly and pretty devastatingly as well. Became an
Really,
intravenous drug user, yeah, by the time I was 19 or something.
which is the elite status when it comes to, yeah, taking anything is.
Yeah, and it was speed back then, right? And it was
Okay.
all biker speed, and you know, which is really the equivalent to crystal meth these days.
Right. Okay.
You know, or when you were injecting it and you did large amounts, it was we did it in the same way as you know, I've taken crystal meths, and because the crystal meth was basically, you know, was kind of like biker speed on turbocharged, you know.
Wow.
But we used to do the biker speed in a turbocharged manner anyhow. So
Yeah.
crystal meth is this kind of, you know, very similar really once I found that.
Yeah. And at what point in your journey then did you think, fuck it, enough's enough. I need to try and seek out some traditional recovery sort of methods. I need help to try and fix this. Was there a distinct point where you thought I need to
Yeah,
fix
well,
it?
I knew I'd had drug problems. Like I'd gone to Morocco to stop the intravenous thing because I couldn't stop doing that, you know. So I knew you know, I had serious drug problems, but I was managing them, you know. And you can always, you know, there were times where I like, this is fucked up, like, and I had to stop the intravenous thing because it played on my head too much, you know. Yeah, I didn't like what I was doing, you know, and so yeah. Sorry, where were we?
Yeah, so just
What's the question again?
hitting the wall. At what point did you think I need to get
Okay,
some
in traditional,
traditional recovery?
yeah. Well, I got into opiates, and then I stopped drinking while I was doing the opiates, um, for a couple of years. And so, in some respects, you know, it was always a question of managing myself. And while I was doing the opiates, life got together quite well. You know, from the outside, it appeared to be, because when I drink, I'm a bit of a disaster. And then switching to the opiates, you know, the opiates cover a lot of bases. You know, and so uh, you know, I was going through withdrawal and stuff, but it was somehow always manageable. And when people are younger as well, they seem to manage it, you know, and don't think that they need to go to rehab, or if they do, they're not going to. It's something they're going to put off, or you know. So it's just kind of a friend of mine pulled me aside in the Philippines and said, "Look, man, you're a fucking terrible alcoholic." You know, and I knew that at that point, but it was in denial, you know, and it was really, yeah, and I'd had that. I remember my mother's daughter saying to me when I was really young, you know, so I think you're an alcoholic, you know, because her father was an alcoholic as well. He couldn't drink anymore, and so I'd always known that, you know. It's just a case of denial and trying to put it off and stuff. And it was actually in the Philippines that my friends kind of got together and put me on a plane and said, "Don't come back until you've got your shit together." You know,
Really?
and then that's when I kind of threw in the towel and went back to Britain and tried traditional rehab for the first time. You know, and I was 30, 31, something like that. 30.
Wow. Yeah, that must have struck a chord when your friends have sent you packing. If you ignore that,
Yeah. Well, it was a disaster. I was ruining my marriage and stuff like that. It's just, you know, but you kind of get, you know, things get progressively worse. I was holding it together, and there was things that could contributed to it. Well, I was holding it together, and then suddenly we couldn't get as much pot, and pot had always been really helpful to me, and you know, as a medicine. And then we had a couple of bad years. I was in the Philippines working as a scuba instructor, or scuba diver, dive master. A couple of bad years, started drinking rum, couldn't get pot, boom, that was it. And then once I started on the rum, you know, my life went into the tailspin really quick, really. And that was the like, you know, that was the kind of end of it, or the beginning of the end of drinking, you know. And then I went home to Britain and went to traditional rehab, and it lasted 30 days and checked out and went to a pharmacy and got a bottle of opiate cough medicine and got a can of special brew and thought about how I was going to get back to the Philippines.
wow, yeah. And what is it about the what was that traditional kind of rehab model? You said you did 30 days there, so
Yeah, well, it wasn't a traditional one. Because when I went back, when I say traditional, it wasn't 12-step. When I went back, you know, I went back, went to the doctor's office, and you know, then went to see what could be done through the National Health. And of course, I guess I got a caseworker or something, and then we went over my history, and with the, you know, the Peace Convoy, and you know, I would say that I was atheist at the time. They just figured that I would do better at this place. That wasn't a 12-step place. And it was run by an ex-Hells Angel in Bournemouth, and so it wasn't a 12-step AA thumping rehab. You know? So I went through detox at home, and then waited for a while until I got a space for this place, and then I thought, oh yeah, so that's what it is. You go to rehab, and then you're all good, and then you recover, and you're no longer. Yeah, in my naivete back then, you know, at 30, going into a treatment facility for the first time.
And judging by the tone of your voice there, apparently that's not the whole story. You don't just go to rehab and come out all right.
No, absolutely not. No, it's normally just one piece of the jigsaw that, you know, I mean, it's when people are going through addiction, often, you know, and just by the nature of addiction, it's kind of like we try and wiggle out as easy and fast as we can, just generally speaking. So I often, for myself, it was finding what won't work, you know, well, maybe I can get out of it this way. Or,
Yeah.
you know. And so I was like, 30 days. Yeah, this isn't where I've got it. Do you know what I mean? You know, and that's what I truly thought to myself after I had a bottle of codeine cough medicine and a couple of cans of brew sitting on a park bench somewhere. And I told myself, no, I've got this. And so I went back there thinking that I kind of had it, you know, and that I wasn't going to drink, and which lasted, you know, maybe a month or 2 months, and then, you know, then it kind of seeps back in.
Yeah. Do you think that voice that tells you I've got it, I've got this, is that a survival mechanism?
Yeah, but it's also the addiction. It's the addiction speaking up, going, "Oh, yeah, no, we've got this," or you know, it's the addiction going, "Yeah, no, you're all right, buddy, we've got this." When you cast your mind back on it, because I don't tell myself things like that now, which is what keeps me from using substance. You know, I could be carrying opiates for somebody else, and they don't talk to me from my pocket. They don't whisper, "Yeah, man," you know.
Yeah, interesting.
Not anymore. Just, you know, through what I've learned, you know.
Yeah, experience has kind of
Experience,
you've been able to deal with that. So you go and sit on the bench and you're having this special brew, which for people listening in Canada, it's I don't know if they stock it over here, but it's
No, I believe it's available in Britain, Nigeria, and Hong Kong.
Really? Is it?
Yeah,
Carlsberg?
Yeah, they won't. Carlsberg, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and they won't sell it in Denmark.
Really? And isn't the percentage something violent, like 10% or 12% a can or something?
Yeah, it's really, really strong. And it's got some other, I don't know what it is about that stuff, but it's like almost like liquid barbiturates or something. We used to call it liquid tunal. It's like, yeah, it creates a special type. It's very strong beer, and it creates this particular type of character, if you will. We used to call them brew crew and
brew
stuff.
crew, that's what I remember them in the festival circuit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they were like,
crew.
"Oh,
the
fuck, stay away from those." The crusties, and it's really it's the extent of how that drug is affecting them. Like you could see another group of people and call them crackheads or whatever. Because the drug is making them behave in a certain manner, and a special group generally makes people behave in a certain out of character manner.
Yeah. So once you're back on the park bench and drinking again, and what's the gap before you check in again to another kind of form of rehab or another version of tradition?
Well, I went back to the Philippines, and then I went back to the Philippines because I had to get back to my wife and my friends, and then I went back and made everybody's life hell for another couple of years. And
good effort.
Yeah, well, and that was inevitable. And then I moved. We moved to a different island, and I separated with my wife, and then I met somebody else in a bar, and who'd actually been to AA and stuff, and she had started drinking again while she was in the Philippines, and she introduced me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was a big shift for me, because then when I opened up the big book, I could resonate with a lot of the stuff that was in there.
Right.
Like, as most people do when they first find the big book, they're like, "Holy shit, this is my story."
Okay. And the big book is the kind of the accompanying manual to AA.
Yeah, it's the number one manual of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay. So. And did you go through the program? Did you check yourself in to go through that program?
I started going to AA then, and I found it pretty useful in the beginning, but I didn't really work the steps and stuff, and I was floating in and out of AA, over the years, and so I didn't really have somebody that I felt comfortable about wanting to do sponsorship with, and then when I did, a certain series of events happened that I stopped going to Alcoholics Anonymous. By the time I got, so what happened is then we moved from the Philippines. I moved to California, and started going to AA then. And this was just outside of San Francisco with my girlfriend Nancy, and we were going to AA quite a bit. But it was in and out, and I remember I asked a friend if he would be my sponsor, and he said yes, he would. And just as we started to do work, he called me to his place, and I went to his house, and he said, "Garyth, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't be your sponsor, because I've just started drinking ayahuasca, and I realized that I can't come to Alcoholics Anonymous anymore, and that's going to be his new path, And so I was like, okay, yeah, sure. And then I looked more into the psychedelic stuff around addiction and what have you, and so shortly thereafter I took a really large dose of LSD. To combat, because I was going in and out, and I remember I was up to that 6-month mark, because I could never get sober for more than 6 months, and I was at that 6-month mark, and I was just about to go out and drink again, and some LSD passed in front of me, and I grabbed it because I knew about it. And my friend was drinking ayahuasca. I knew about, I'd taken lots of LSD before, but I knew about what had gone on in Saskatchewan, in the 1950s, using LSD for alcoholism. And
really?
so I used it with that intention, and I'm coming up to 20 years now. I haven't drank since.
Huh. Congratulations, that's phenomenal. I want to unpack that a little bit more, if I may. That's a very interesting part of the the story. And
yeah,
in fact, my next question to you was, yeah, how did you go from traditional recovery methods into a more psychedelic realm? And then ayahuasca seems to be the trigger, or the conversational piece around ayahuasca was the pricked your ears
yeah,
up with your friend, right? But the LSD, that's fascinating to me, because you've done it before, and yet the intention that you had, because there was obviously you had an intention to change. That's what's
yeah,
congruent about your story so far, is
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
wanted a different
Yes.
life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it
You
was
did
killing me.
want it, right?
It was fucking killing me. And if you know, when I was blackout drunk, you know, I wouldn't. It's like rolling the fucking dice. You know, it's
Yeah,
like that for me. If I drink, it's like rolling the dice and whoopee, let's go. If you ever read that book, Dice Man, it was really, it was really kind of like that, and that's just scary because, like,
yeah.
yeah, I
It's
remember
a bit Russian
close
roulette
to the
style.
end of really close to the end of my drinking, we found 161 rum once, and my girlfriend and I, Nancy, we both drank it, and I got arrested, I think, and then she woke up in I woke up in Marin County Jail. She woke up in some guy's apartment, and you know, and that's just, you know, that's not an adult way to go through life.
No, that's a pretty short, sharp realization that you don't really want to spend the
Yeah,
rest of your time in Marine County if
yeah,
you can help
no,
it.
no, 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 horrible. Yeah.
And so the acid, do you remember that high dose trip that you took when it was in front of you? And you got, was it liquid?
Yeah,
Was it tabs?
no, it was paper,
Yeah.
but I was in Marin County, just outside of San Francisco. Like the psychedelic, that's in the psychedelic triangle or something, you know.
Right.
As I got to know much more, because I was new to Marin County at that point.
Okay.
And so, yeah, and we lived in West Marin, so I grabbed the acid, took it home. I didn't use eye shades, but I remember I made a playlist or something. I had speakers on either side of me. Head
Wicked.
was back, and it was all about going inside with the intention of dealing with this fucking alcoholism. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And that
and
intention, the famous set and setting seems to hold
yes,
true to your account there, putting
yeah,
the
hmm,
mindset of the intention of going within,
hmm,
and then the setting of being deliberate with your surroundings, like you say, set the
yeah,
speakers up, playlist, like taking it
yeah,
seriously and not
yeah.
recreationally the
No,
way I
no, it
did.
wasn't a recreational thing. No, no.
And do you remember confronting anything that sort of embodied the personality of alcoholism within you? Was it a kind of a demon or anything like that? Or
It was within about halfway through the trip or something. It just kind of like a light bulb thing of like, if you don't drink, life will be awesome. And it's as simple as that. And but I got it, you know. And I'd been told that since I got into AA, which was years before, you know, when I first went to my first meeting, or you know, before that, or you know, even before that, you know, I knew all of this stuff, and a lot of, like, you know, like with the AA, it's all about the destruction and stuff that happens with drinking, and I'm all very aware of, you know, all of that negative stuff that happens with alcohol. And this was just like a light bulb really going on, saying, you know what, if you don't drink, life will be awesome.
funny how, yeah,
Yeah.
the answers are the same. Yeah, it's simple, but it was a visceral understanding to the point where it was you embodied it.
And I after that, I there's been times where I want to change my consciousness, but it was relieved from me at that point. It was taken away from me, you know. But you know, cannabis also plays a role in that. When I going through Alcoholics Anonymous, when I would go into AA, of course, I would stop using cannabis, and because that's not part of doing the program and all of this stuff. And but I found out about attention deficit disorder, and I had attention deficit disorder while I was in AA, and that's, you know, kind of how I found out about it. And then I was diagnosed later. Um, so um, and so that was okay for me to, during that trip also, I realized that it wasn't just that I couldn't go back to AA because I was going to continue smoking cannabis, but I just felt I couldn't move on. And with the AA, as it had been very useful, it was also being detrimental for my progression to stand up sometimes 3 times a day and go, oh, hi, I'm Garyth, I'm an alcoholic, drug addict, and all of the
Yeah,
above. I
interesting.
don't identify like that now.
Right.
And it was negative for me to identify as such. It wasn't. I was keeping me stuck in this certain place.
And what did the psychedelic kind of internal revolution give you in terms of identity that was positive? Did it give you something that was positive, or was it just something different? It was just a different process that you didn't have to get up and admit in front of people anything. It was more. Was it more of an internal?
No, it's an internal thing, and I just found that I wasn't going to get out. That wasn't the way for me to get out of that situation. Yeah. And then and I take clients occasionally to Alcoholics Anonymous. If that's what floats their boat, then more power to them.
Yeah.
But when I've gone to meetings, and it's been 10 years since I was in a meeting or something, and I've gone sat down with somebody, and then it's I can feel everybody going, "Oh, fresh meat," and then newcomers, and they're all like going on about the disease model and stuff like that. So, and I just had that feeling like, wow, nothing's fucking changed since the last time I was here.
Interesting.
And if that works for people, and it stops it, and then they don't drink, and then I think that's great. Just on a personal level, it's not.
It wasn't
really holding me back. It's not. I can't identify like that. I don't think it's right to.
No, agreed. Yeah,
I don't smoke cigarettes now, and that's one of the most addictive substances that we have, and I don't identify as an ex-nicotine user. So I know how powerful it is, and I wouldn't pick it up because I know how powerful it is. The same with alcohol; it changes my brain chemistry. It's just it's not. It would be unadvisable for me to do that. I don't want to do that. I wouldn't.
Yeah, I remember when I was a youngster, I went to a Temescal retreat in Spain and did some sweat lodge work at a ripe old age of 16. Had my brains blown out in the pitch darkness, and taking all sorts of Alacoya and San Pedro and peyote, and it was a fantastic experience. And before the Temescal started, a peace pipe was passed around, and the shaman stated that the Ecuadorian practice of Temescal, if you smoke nicotine outside of ceremony, she smokes you. And I never forgot that. I never forgot that quote. And I've experienced it myself, and everyone that I speak to that's had the mental battles with nicotine has said similar things. It really is. It gets a grip of you, and that's
that. Occasionally I've used hape with friends. I used it not so long ago at a 5-MeO gathering of practitioners, and it's a strong drug. It really is, and I would use it in that context. I think, or mapucho or whatever it is with ayahuasca
in ceremony. Yeah, interesting.
Yes, but just to use it, of course, it got taken away from its how it's supposed to be used in ceremony, to be used in something that.
Yeah, so we've touched a little bit there on traditional versus kind of psychedelic. I wondered if you could explain a little bit about what entheogenic, or the term entheogen, means for people that aren't quite sure.
It's derived from a Greek word, I think, from divine within, God manifesting something, divinity. I think it's a better word to be using than psychedelics. A psychedelic had too much of a link to public service announcements of people jumping out of windows high on acid and stuff. So I think it's maybe a better term than psychedelic in that respect. But I'd like us to be getting away from stigma around words like psychedelic and stuff. And I think we're getting there slowly
but surely. Yeah. And entheogenic is like a category. Is it plants then? Is it, or it can just be a chemical?
No, I wouldn't say so, because I work with 5-MeO, and I work with lab made 5-MeO. That's an entheogenic experience.
Yeah, right.
You could say that. What's the difference between? Maybe somebody would say, "Oh no, the toad is the entheogenic experience, not lab-made 5-MeO." Well, that's bullshit, because all that the toad does is reproduce the same thing that comes from a lab anyhow. 5-MeO DMT. So, so I don't think it. No, I think that, I had an entheogenic experience when I took LSD.
Yeah, okay,
So I would, and I don't get caught. I don't. There's a bit of that in our community, the plant community and those that chemicals and stuff. And I find that the plant crew get a little bit. What's the word for it? I don't.
Put out.
Got to be careful here.
Synthesis.
Yeah, I guess so. I know. I'm all about. I'm a shulganist at heart. If something's going to work a certain way, then
Yeah, it's got to be about pragmatism, hasn't it? Does it work or does it not work? Period.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, and so I think LSD can be a profound substance for people to be using, but then so can ayahuasca.
Yeah.
So can psilocybin.
Agreed. Yeah. And what would you kind of explain to people the role of what a shaman is in kind of traditional tribal societies, and what their role is in the sort of the entheogenic process? How would you explain that to people that aren't familiar?
I don't know. I guess shaman from traditionally really is a member of the community that kind of bridges the gap between human normal human existence and the spirit realm, right? So he's a kind of mediator in between the two, or liaison officer or something or other. I'm thinking back to gypsy liaison officers, an intermediary or something or other, some go-between, So, and I think that there's a lot of that there's a long lineage that happens with that in tradition,
right?
So
someone can't just say I'm a shaman one day. It's
no, and so that's not something I would ever call have the audacity to call myself. I've never had any traditional training, if you will. But then at the same time, I do come from psychedelic drug culture,
right?
I would consider myself a bit of an elder now. In some respects. Well, I am compared to the 21-year-old that was punting acid at festivals. And so I learned from people that were my age now, that have more life experience and stuff, and so we have that in our culture. We have elders, and people, and then so kind of we stand on their shoulders, if you will. So in some respects, like I do work with 5-MeO DMT, and one of the people that I have worked with has been sort of a mentor to me through working with that medicine. Well, her mentor was Ralph Metzner. So you can see how that, so we do have something of a lineage within our culture. I wouldn't necessarily call that shamanistic, but it's a body of knowledge that has formed from the times that we've started to work with these substances in our Western culture.
Western version. It's a pedagogy in its own right, isn't it? And like you say, a body of knowledge that's passed down almost like a experiential folklore, or from one to the next, and guiding you. I myself was guided by much older friends than me that taught me about setting and took me through my first DMT trips and sort of internal work, which I think is by far the way to do it. If you're going to do it, is have some guidance from people that have been there a few times in the realms themselves. It's they're not things to be taken lightly, as we both know, and people do take them.
Having said that, though, like I did a lot of, as I got back into the psychedelic world, then I got into Burning Man and stuff, and that was kind of like finding my old culture again, psychedelic culture, but in a different place.
Right.
So it's kind of like going home. But I gotta say that a lot of the way that we used to use LSD and these drugs and stuff when I was younger was quite different, and I would take more acid so as I could stay up all night to sell more acid. And so, and it wasn't something that I would go off and do on my own, which is the way I take LSD now, is normally with other people, and much more of a recreational setting, if you will. For me, LSD when I was younger was more like an anarchist tool.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it was coming to light as that, was it, from the Leary kind of era? Was that how it was
Well,
getting
and
known?
from myself, it was being involved. The Peace Convoy was kind of like, we were different from Deadheads and stuff. It was more like class war,
Yeah.
and the injection of class war with the hippie kind of thing. In the States, the people that followed the dead were quite different from the people that lived in buses and trucks in Britain,
Oh,
even
I can
though
imagine.
they had dreadlocks and sold acid. You know,
Yeah, they didn't have the
so
same class war element that's
no,
known in the
and we were
UK.
unemployed culture, and we're in Britain. We've got that class system that we're very, very, if you're from working class, then you're very much aware of. Yeah, exactly. So
Fascinating. Now, to put it in context, I first saw you, Garyth, at the Dosed movie premiere here in Vancouver just before Christmas. You were up on stage with a panel of all sorts of interesting characters and legends
yes,
alike
yeah,
after
yeah, I
the
know.
premiere. I wonder if you
Yeah,
could
yeah,
just briefly give an overview of how you got involved with the Dose film, and we can kind of go into that story a little bit to give people some
yeah,
context if they haven't seen it.
yeah.
How did you
Sure.
get involved with that? Because that's a remarkable story in itself.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate enough to get involved in some uh, training in the fundamentals of psychedelic psychotherapy about 4 years ago up on Cortez. And it was a small group, and we did like 180 hours or something. I got in on it. I managed to get in on it because I was already working with psychedelics. Back then, the Ibogaine was in a different classification, and so we were operating back then. And so somebody that I'd met through that course called me and said, "Oh, some people called me. They're making a movie about mushrooms and a girl with addiction. Are you interested in talking to them?" And I said, "Oh, well, yeah, sure, fuck it, why not? I'll have a chat." I wasn't sure, and Blair, my girlfriend, was like, "Oh, I don't know about that." We weren't too sure about exposing ourselves and stuff. And so by this time, the I began to become into a different category, and so but I said, "Sure, yeah, I'll go meet them." I knew the documentary was going to be made, and we didn't really know if we were going to be involved or what. So we went ahead and we met with Adrienne and Tyler, and when I met with them and I got a brief kind of overview of what was going on with her, and they were all about mushrooms at the time, and I was like, well, this is all very well. This girl needs ibogaine, and they're like, ibogaine? Yeah, you need ibogaine. So I told them a bit about ibogaine, and so they went away, and then in the movie they get about a week later or something, they go to the maps thing, and then they meet Gabor, and Gabor says, "Oh yeah, you should be taking ibogaine." And they're like, "Oh, we've heard about this ibogaine thing."
Yeah.
And then that's how it all kind of unfolded and stuff. So
Amazing.
yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah.
omen was strong. You need it. When you hear it for a second time, your ears prick up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially
Especially when you hear it from something like Gabor Mate as well.
Agreed, who is
So
a
yes,
legend in his own right. And just for
yeah,
people that aren't sure as well, I could definitely do with an upgraded um, expert definition. When you explained to them about Ibogaine, what did you tell them? What did you explain to them
Oh,
what it was?
yeah. I explained to it. Well, there's a substance that's derived from West African entheogen, iboga, and it's called ibogaine. It's been used for a long time, like actually since before I was born. You've been used. Howard Lotsof discovered it with some others, and his wife Norma back in 1962. I was born in '65,
Wow.
and so it's been known that long that it takes away opiate withdrawals.
Right.
And not only does it take away the opiate withdrawals, but it also steps in as a powerful addiction interrupter, and it holds people if they've got enough medicine in them for a 2 to 3 month period. And normally, when people quit using opiates or the opioid cessation, what comes after the acute withdrawal syndrome, which is fucking horrible in itself, is can be months of depression, anxiety, malaise, and often people just want a breath of fresh air,
Right.
and they might be, a month into their detox, and then they'll just go use again, and boom, you get rewired again, and back to square one often. You know, that's
I see.
the way it goes. And Ibogaine can totally interrupt that. You know, and so often after 3 months after treatment, you know, when people don't have quite so much protection from the medicine, it's not like they wake up and like they're in withdrawal or anything like that, but they don't have quite the protection that they did have. Sorry, I just got to let my dog out here. And you know, and life will come back and slap you in the face, because that's what life does. And during that 3 month period, Ibogaine's holding things for people, and stuff can go off like water off a duck's back. But then, you know, there comes the time where you have to meet life on life's terms. And so it can be very powerful how it can hold somebody through a detox, and then through 3 months or even longer sometimes, with boosters and stuff. And it's during that 3 month time, you know, if people are doing a lot of work, maybe working with a therapist and stuff around, you know, the reasons why they got into that position. During that 3 month period, people are normally very open to suggestion. Instead of normally when you come out of detox, you're all shut down. Everybody's fucking assholes. Leave me alone. You know, and so it allows people the opportunity to be able to start dealing with those, you know, reasons and underlying causes for the why they ended up in that place in the
first place. Yeah, and there's a fascinating part in the Dosed movie. My favorite part was when you look to the camera and basically just suggest that a higher dose is needed. It's a fantastic part where you have almost a childish grin on your face, where something isn't going right or something for some reason, and the camera cuts to your facial expression, and she's like, she needs a higher dose.
Yeah. Well, often that is, you know, for people, you know, maybe you just need just that little bit more medicine to, you know, make things a little bit more apparent.
Yeah, I mean, to put it in context, Adrienne was a heroin user of a very long time, right? Deep in the addiction cycle. This isn't. That's why you said that. It wasn't just to blast her socks off. It was actually purposeful. For those that haven't seen the Dosed movie, I recommend everyone goes and sees it. They're on pause, I think you mentioned, with their world tour at the moment, obvious reasons, but you can watch it online, I think, right?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know if that will be picked up again now. I think, you know, they were doing a tour in cinemas to promote it, and then after it had done, then it was going to go online. So I don't think it will get any more cinema stuff now after it's been released online. So everybody can watch it at home.
I'm really hoping that people do, you know, log on and watch it, and it gets the attention it deserves, because it was really apparent to see. It was just very obvious that these, you know, entheogenic modalities have their place, and they do work. It's, you know, it's time, I think, that these research methods get the funding that they deserve. And I mean, obviously there's some fantastic work going on with the MAPS guys and testing, especially here, even in BC. Like,
yes, and back in Britain as well, there's quite a bit going on. I think, you know, with Dr. David Nutt and Dr. Ben Sessa and stuff. Yeah, there's things are moving. Of course, they're not moving as fast as we'd like them to, but you know.
Of course,
So, and also, we're unsure as to how things are going to open up. You know, we've had cannabis become legal here in the last couple of years, which has been an absolute shit show, and drove the price up of legal cannabis, which is really inferior, and nobody wants to use any.
I'm glad you said that, Gareth. I want to touch on that briefly. Years ago, BC was known as a mecca for good weed. World famous BC bud, but everything else that came along with it for outdoor growers and craft growers and, you know, organic growers alike. And then this legalization thing happened, just kind of peaking as I arrived last year, and I tried some of it, and I was shocked, absolutely shocked on how poor quality it was. Like vacuum dust. It was like something you pull out of a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, so I've heard, like, I just on principle, I won't smoke it, but I haven't gone into one of those places, but sorry, I need to get a charger here. But just from what I've been seeing on the internet, hearing from other people, and seeing on the THC levels and stuff like that, it just looks like garbage.
It is.
And of course they wanted to come in. It's almost like they're addicted to prohibition. And so they had to come in and disrupt that whole great thing that we had going on,
Right.
and which has totally backfired on them. I don't know how they're going to recover from that,
Yeah.
So especially now with the coronavirus, I'm not too sure what's going to happen now.
Yeah, I wonder.
With that as well, because a lot of the legal stores and stuff, people aren't going into them, and a lot of people are buying online as well. And so the prices are so ridiculously high, and the quality is really low, and so it's not going to work. Their little experiment didn't work, and everybody lost a lot of money.
I think a lot of people got slapped with all sorts of fines, and on their side, I don't think they've cashed in as much as they thought they would. It seems to me they're treating it like a mass producible product, which cannabis isn't.
Yeah, it's not. No, it's a community thing, not a corporate thing.
Right. Yeah, and you can't mass grow a plant and expect it to be a good quality plant.
No.
You just can't. Even mass scale agriculture has shown us that the quality of each individual strain of whatever you're planting at the millions and millions in crops doesn't come out as good as if you craft grow and give attention and love to a single or a smaller crop. They miss that, and then let alone the curing processes and everything else that they seem to screw up. I'm definitely not a fan, and I only tried it once. I actually had a chest infection for 3 weeks after I tried that, and I was like,
okay,
I'm good. I don't think I'll ever try that again. And I'm just surprised. I'm very surprised at the way they've gone. In contrast, going down to Washington, I went down to a concert actually down at the Gorge Amphitheatre last year, and stopped off at a dispensary down there. And their model is different. They actually have lots of craft growers who contribute their batches of cannabis to the dispensary, and the quality was fantastic. The sort of the model they're using seems very different to the British Columbian sort of approach.
Well, they have to go back to the drawing board now. Right. So they wanted to be a part of our culture. They were given some clues on how they could be a part of our culture, and they ignored that, pushed out everybody that was a contributor to the culture, and now they can't play.
Right.
So they're going to have to, do you know what I mean? We've still got our culture intact. Yeah. I mean, if 420 would have been huge this year if it wasn't for the virus, right? And that's a celebration of everybody smoking weed that's got nothing to do with the LPs and the government.
Right.
There's no representation of LPs there,
Yeah.
And I'd have to say it would have been a lot of craft cannabis and mushrooms. More and more mushrooms have shown up at 420 every year. People with big old bags of mushrooms, mushroom chocolates and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, it's true. I went to the craft cannabis fair last year here in Vancouver, and managed to pick up a mush teller, which was supposedly mushrooms infused with organic homemade kind of chocolate spread style. And I said to the guy, I was like, does this work, or is this a bit of a setup? He's like, no, I promise you. I was like, I will find you. If I try this and this is just Nutella, I will track you down. It seems to me there's a crossover, isn't there, with cannabis culture and mushroom culture? They seem to kind of go quite nicely. Mushrooms seem to be quite kind in low doses. You can get away with quite a lot. What is it you think about the high dose, the heroic McKenna doses of mushrooms that leads to some kind of discovery or cessation of addiction, or what is it? Some kind of revolution. What is it? Because myself as a 19-year-old, mushrooms changed my life. I can say it now that I had an absolute 180 in the direction I was going for the better. I might add as well. And what is it about high dose mushrooms that kind of has effects?
Well, maybe an awakening. It's an abrupt awakening to something else that's going on. And other realities. I mean, as soon as I took psilocybin, it changed everything for me. I mean, I did get into heavier drug use afterwards, but it was I just, that was also part of my nature and stuff, and risk taking at a young age. And that's something that young men do, especially around 19, take enormous risks and stuff.
Yeah.
So, but, yeah, no, well, just large entheogenic experiences. I've done a really high dose of psilocybin once when I lived in Marin. Very, very high dose. I don't know if have you heard of Kalindi E or Kalindi Lee, the black guy from Detroit, mushroom guy. He's does a lot of really high dose mushrooms and has a lot of these protocols and stuff.
Right.
But that's a little bit more than Terence McKenna's heroic doses. I like his were like 5 grams or something or other, and Kalindi's are 35, 40 gram plus.
Sugar Ray Leonard.
And so I did 25 grams once, and yeah, well, that is quite a lot, but in some respects it would be safer than doing an Ibogaine flood dose, because there's nothing, physically that could harm you by doing that kind of high dose, psychologically there's some challenging areas of tripping like that, or it's not even really tripping, it's more like a happening, or something similar along the lines of a near-death experience,
Right.
So it can produce the same kind of deep experiences, which I also find with the 5-MeO.
Okay.
And very high dose psilocybin can be a lot like high dose 5-MeO.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And is that kind of, does that give reason as to why you kind of prefer to work with Ibogaine and 5-MeO? Why are some of the reasons?
Yes, because of the results.
The results speak for themselves.
Yeah, really. I mean, I said in the movie, when they're asking about Adrienne, should she microdose with this amount next and this and that, and I said, well, you're just fucking dicking around. This girl needs Ibogaine.
I love that bit.
And so, while if we're trying to get a certain result, then certain substances get that desired result.
Right, they do the job.
Well, and I haven't said that. I don't like to throw anybody at the deep end when I'm working with anybody with anything. Right. There's a lot of different sensitivities to psychedelics, and so I always tread very, very lightly with people in the beginning. Yeah, and I never throw anybody into the deep end of the pool. Right. I'm actually really probably pretty well known in our community for tiptoeing around those substances. Like, I'll always get people to where they want to go. Yeah, but we ain't in any fucking hurry to do it.
Right.
So people have been traumatized as well by substances like 5-MeO and stuff, and I'm not here to do harm. Yeah, and also people have died from taking Ibogaine as well. So it's not about doing any harm or anything. So yeah, you can get into the high dose stuff, but only if it's done safely. Yeah, and it's not something that should ever be rushed into.
Right. And with the Ibogaine kind of dosages, is it something that the more you do, the more tolerance you build, or does it have an inverse proportion relationship with the more you do, the less tolerance you have? How does that work?
How do you mean with Ibogaine?
Yeah, with Ibogaine, it's like if you take it once, is it the second time you take it? Do you need double, or does it depend on the person?
It depends on the person, what's going on. Yeah, I think when people do their first Ibogaine experience, it's difficult to kind of replicate that in some ways, but then also it depends on what that experience was like and how much was given, and the Ibogaine experiences can there can be a wide difference in how an experience goes.
Yeah.
So but often it doesn't have the dramatic life-changing effects on repeated doses as it does on that first one. Can be, but then it really depends. Like I've treated people more than once with Ibogaine, and it's not because the Ibogaine didn't work or the treatment was bad. It's because the circumstance, they didn't stick to their plan. Yeah. There's other things, the aftercare and stuff, and And as I was saying before, people would try and wiggle their way through an easier way, and they're like, "Ah, fuck," and we learn by our mistakes. I wasn't cured from alcohol from an LSD journey. There are other things that contributed to that. Right. So I got to that point, the rehab, the losing my marriage, losing my living in the Philippines, all of those things were contributing factors that led to me taking a substance which I was the most open to receiving that information that had to give me at that time. And then it's another step further. And sometimes like with the Ibogaine, that first initial kaboom, and the realization and the awakening that can come about from that,
Yeah, interesting.
Can be. But I'd taken LSD shitloads of times before I took it for that time for dealing with my alcoholism. And it was the intention that was behind that.
Right. So, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That going in with that mindset is.
Yeah, the intention was totally about, that's what it was about. And and I've taken MDMA with the intention for dealing with PTSD as well. And then I've taken MDMA with intention of connecting with a loved one, sexually, whatever. And then also I've taken MDMA to dance my fucking ass off all night at Burning Man in a spiritual context.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? With a group spiritual connection.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for that.
100%.
And that's why kids want to go back to, keep on going back to, that's why, the festivals and everything, there's a form of connection there. And also, we used to take MDMA and LSD and stuff at Burning Man, and that was, in completely different surroundings from how I work with it now in a room with eye shades and supported and stuff. Well, also I'd like to say that the festivals would support people, because it's a group support somehow. I wouldn't feel too comfortable about taking LSD around a whole bunch of people. I'm kind of past that, but I do that at Burning Man, and feel kind of supported by the community. I mean, it's be totally different from me taking LSD and walking down fucking Granville Street on a Saturday night.
Agreed.
Agreed. So with setting, these substances can be used recreationally as well, or in different ways. I went and saw Avatar in 3D on half a hit of liquid. It was awesome, and I think it enhanced the movie even more. And I would consider doing something like that again.
Yeah.
So, you could see the difference there, maybe in recreational drug use and deeper stuff.
Deeper work, yeah. And when it comes to the work that you do with the people that you work with, is it just about working on the internal cerebral components, or is there a corporal aspect to your work too? And by that I mean, we've seen stuff like breath work, yoga practice, moving the body in a certain way, ecstatic dance. So there's a whole sort of physical component that often comes to a healing process. Is that something that you consider with your work, or you're aware of?
Yes, yeah. Well, particularly when we're dealing with the opiate people, a part of the way Ibogaine works is it has an antidepressant aspect to it, which seems to get triggered as the endorphin system starts to work again. So the physical aspect, often when I've treated people that have come to the couch and then they go back to the couch, well, often they're going to relapse, because they're not putting the effort in. And so that I find that all of these things, other things, physical aspect can really, really help. And it's also important with the opiate people to re-engage with their bodies in some way from being so disconnected, and not really in their body as such, Right. And so things like yoga, all of these things in meditation can all contribute, and working out.
Interesting.
Like for the opiate people, a lot of the people that really make it, dudes can become gym queens, because that's where they get their fix.
Right.
That's where they get their feel good.
Yeah.
They go to the gym and like we do grass grind, we didn't do it last year, but that's an example of grass grind Like, it's a bitch doing that. Or was it 2,400 steps or something?
Right.
And it's really hard work. When you get to the top with the whole endorphin thing, and
Yeah.
then you feel awesome when you're having that tea up at the top and looking down over the city and stuff. And so it's important for people to, especially coming out of opiate stuff, is to really re-engage with the body and strength and busting a sweat every day is really important. An important thing about keeping psychological well-being, in defense against depression and stuff.
Yeah, fantastic. That's very encouraging.
And even just like a fucking walk in the forest. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's really important for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So.
Move, people.
So,
We're
yeah.
connected
Yes.
to our brains by our bodies, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
that's important.
that's encouraging to hear. And I guess it would depend on the person of what kind of stage or tier of movement they're ready for or need to start with,
Yeah.
right? Depending on what their
Yeah.
background is and what's been going on. But no, that's encouraging to hear that there's a corporal side that's encouraged. I think it's vital. Like you say, if they get back on the couch, you're just going to repeat that physiological pattern quick.
I normally work with people over 2 weeks or even longer sometimes, and then the last few days is really me pushing people to, and they don't really feel like doing that so much, but as I push them, it re-engages their endorphin system, because that comes alive again. Because when you're taking opiates, the endorphin system just shuts down. It has no need to be working.
Okay.
And so then once you get the opiates out of the system, then it re-engages. People don't have a lot of strength at first, but it comes back very quickly. And so the faster, I really push it into, I get them moving, and then the antidepressant bit starts happening. They start to feel good, and then hopefully they keep that up.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think I remember reading in a John Lilly book at the center of the hurricane or something, the float tank guy that came up with the flotation tank. He spent some time with a guy, I want to say his name was Oscar. It was Oscar something, who was kind of from the lineage of Gurdjieff, the Gurdjieff kind of practice, like the fourth way practice. And they had a big part in their module. I remember John Lilly writing about this, about physical exertion being a path to spiritual awakening, realization, understanding, something like that, pushing themselves beyond what kind of Gurdjieff would call like a super effort, beyond the wall of what you thought was possible.
Right.
So it's fascinating to hear, like something like the grouse grind, for example. You're pushing people just to get to the peak and just kind of let it flood through them how it may.
Psychedelic experiences can be a bit like grouse grind as well,
Right.
It's like, oh fuck, they're not easy.
Right, going through it,
but very rewarding once you get to the top.
Yeah.
And often a very, I wouldn't want to say difficult, but challenging, like or what we would have called in the recreational context a bad trip.
Yeah.
And often the bad trips, or sorry, not bad trips, but the most difficult trips, the most arduous, the ones that can be the most rewarding.
Right, you got to go through that purgatory almost to come out the other side and feel, have the light bulb moment, have the understanding. Makes sense, doesn't it? What goes up comes down kind of philosophy. Yeah, you got to go through it to come out the other end. I wondered if I could pick your brains, Garyth, on if you could kind of, in a perfect world for healthy adults out there that maybe have never had a psychedelic experience or an entheogenic experience, what substance would you recommend or kind of suggest that people go on their first trip? I know it's a case by case basis. People are very individual, but is there?
Yeah, it is a very individual thing, and I kind of sometimes work that out when I'm talking to somebody, because especially since Dosed, there's been more people that are wanting to experience, and then looking for people that might be able to do that for them.
Yeah.
So I found cactus to be good.
Right.
And so and now people can microdose as well. It's becoming easier for people to obtain certain psychedelics. Younger people can go on the dark web, and a lot of young people can go and buy just exactly what the fuck they want.
Mail order.
Exactly, mail order, and young kids, they know they're around their way around a computer. So a lot of substances are totally available to everybody, but they're not to everybody as well. now online you can get mushrooms here in Canada pretty easily.
Yeah.
Microdose and not so, and so that can be okay. And that's how we went and picked mushrooms in the fields. That's how we got into our first. That was my first psychedelic experience.
Amazing.
And then we found those people that lived in buses and sold acid. And then we realized that we should be hanging out with those people all the time. But I'd say cactus is, this urban shaman here in town. You can buy San Pedro or a Peruvian torch or peyote. And I found that even the cactus experience is quite long. It can be quite gentle, and you roll into it quite slowly.
Oh, lovely.
And it is kind of waves, and it oscillates and gets a little stronger. And I found when I did the Peruvian torch, it was at its strongest like at 12 hours.
Right.
And the whole thing lasted about 18. And when I did peyote down in Mexico, it was the same thing. Really? And when we were sitting on the beach and the sunset was going down, and I didn't have any uncomfortable introspection or anything like that. And my friend was funny. He was saying that a friend of his had done peyote down on the beach with him, and she had said to him, "Wow, this is just what acid's trying to be like."
Okay.
But it was very gentle and very, and even though we took a lot of peyote throughout the day and through the evening and everything, it was very long but very gentle. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, this would be pretty good for people that wanted to experience a psychedelic experience, because they wouldn't have to, even though it's quite long, it's manageable.
Yeah.
So people could be in that state for quite some time. But then I also work with people that have had no psychedelic experience with 5-MeO-DMT.
Right.
Which is a pretty powerful psychedelic. But the way I work with it, I work very incrementally, and I step them into that space slowly, usually over the space of an hour. Okay. And even though that's quite intense, it's quite short, so they're back quite quickly as well.
Right.
So,
yeah, I definitely experienced that with a DMT trip of my own. It was 15 minutes, felt like 2 days. And yeah, it was.
Was that N-DMT or 5-MeO-DMT?
Good question. I smoked it.
Probably the N-DMT. A lot of geometric patterns and shapes. And
it was very, very visual. I can remember it.
That's
clear as yesterday.
That's N-DMT.
Okay. Yeah, and
the 5-MeO is slightly different.
Is it? Okay. And what are some of the main differences?
Well, they call them the power and the glory.
Okay.
And so the glory is the one you did, and the power is the one that I work with. Or they're known as the spirit molecule and the God molecule. And you did the spirit molecule, and the 5-MeO is the God molecule.
Okay.
So, but the God molecule is not psychedelic in the sense of patterns and shapes and geometric shapes and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's more of a sense of connecting with source. It's that's why they call it God molecule, I think.
Yeah.
It's more of a non-dual, non-polar experience.
Yeah.
All is one.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to put into words.
Yeah, of course, words cease to explain, don't they?
So, and then people get different things out of it, but divinity is one that I hear a lot. But then people bring, culturally, they bring certain stuff to the table as well. I found when I've been working with Latinos, they tend to have more of a divinity experience,
Interesting. Yeah.
And culturally, I think that they're bringing that with them when they come to the house.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because of their upbringing or nurture from their culture. Yeah, there's a more of a Catholicism implement or some sign of deity figure that translates as source. Yeah, fascinating. Well, a lot of the religious background has kind of common truths amongst them, doesn't it? Based around these observations, and perhaps they were skewed along the way. But I think at their beginnings, they were all kind of touching on similar shit.
Yeah, love.
Right. Yeah.
Which is the basis of the psychedelic experience anyhow for a lot of us. And that's what it really boils down to at the end of the day. Love for yourself, love for others, love for the planet.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic.
It's a really important fucking message.
Agreed. Yeah, a simple 4-letter word that shouldn't really be taken too lightly. I don't think there's a lot of information there in that word in and of itself. Garyth, just the kind of closing thoughts, mate. I wonder if you had a message to anyone out there that might be struggling, or maybe if they're even listening, that would be nice. But if they're out there struggling with their own kind of addictions or denials or substance abuses, what kind of message would you have to those people, like, going forward? Perhaps they hit like the roadblock that you did. They want to change. They're not sure how to do it. They know something's not quite right. They want to fix it. What would you kind of say to those people?
Well, it's never too late to kind of like start bettering yourself, and it's not always easy, and people are dealing with a lot of demons and stuff, and but when I find that when you're on that, when you start working on a path, with time, the path gets easier. It's not, addiction and stuff like that. It's not something that's normally dealt with in one psychedelic experience, or simply going to rehab or going to AA or anything like that. But they're all steps in the right direction. And we're all kind of works in progress. I don't consider myself I don't consider myself consider myself a drug addict, but I'm not cured as such. I don't, how can I put this? I don't identify as an alcoholic or a drug addict, anymore. And I did for a time, because I was really suffering from that, And
but your work isn't done either, right? It's
not, no, of course not. It won't be until you breathe out that last breath. Exactly. We're always a work in progress, and we're forever learning.
Yeah,
we all are always learning, and so and it's not linear. It's not a straight line out. It's wiggly and stuff, and time gets easier as you get older as well. I wouldn't want to go back to being in my early 20s or something. That's a rough time.
Yeah.
So but and it's not all about traditional. It's really, really about connecting more so with yourself and finding self-love and finding purpose. Whatever that purpose might be.
Agreed.
And that's that's really what gets people to connect to find their way back to themselves. Yeah. Because that's what happens in addiction, is you get taken away from your blueprint,
right?
And well, maybe it is your blueprint at the time. Like when I was going through addiction, I was like, why the fuck is this happening to me?
Right.
And then as I got out of it with the, with the LSD, and then starting and wanting to then work and taking Ibogaine, and then wanting to work with people, it all became very apparent to me why I went through all of that. I went through all of that, so I was prepared for the next stage of my life.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do what I do now without having done that.
Agreed. Yeah, you have a lifetime of experience crammed into a short period. Yeah, to come out the other end and be experienced and knowledgeable yourself. You're right. So now that you can help others and kind of pay it forward. And when it comes to helping, people, how can people get in touch with you to know more about kind of the work you do and stuff like that? Is it a website thing, an email thing?
Yeah, well, you can find us through Inner Realms, or just Google my name, and then our website comes up. I think Inner Realms, but that's we're innerrealms.com or innerrealmscenter.com.
Inner Realms Center, perfect. I'll make sure for people that are listening, the show notes, I'm going to make sure they blow people's minds. There'll be all sorts of links in there, and to all the stuff we've covered today, of which is just a smidgen of what we talked about. Well, I'll make sure your website's up there, and some links in there. Garyth, thank you so much for coming on. I really feel like this is 1% of the possible landscape that we could have talked about. There's so many fascinating things. So like I've said to many of my other guests, if we're still locked down in quarantine, I might be getting you back on sooner rather than later.
Sure thing.
So, thank you very much for taking time out.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, mate. And best of luck with everything. And as soon as this blows over, we'll have to get together.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, right.
Yeah, lovely. All right, take care. We'll speak soon.
Okay, best of luck with everything. Cheers, mate. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
This episode of the Move Mind podcast was brought to you by CBD Mountain, the sport and fitness CBD. Head over to cbdmountain.com for a range of soft gels, skin balms, oils and vapes, and purchase online and have the premium quality CBD delivered directly to your door. cbdmountain.com.